So hello, everyone. My name is Monique Scraper, and I am the crew leader of TYPROS Leadership and Service Crew, which oversees TYPROS Get On Board program. TYPROS is a program of the Tulsa Regional Chamber, whose mission is to make Tulsa an awesome city for young professionals to live, work, and play. As a part of its mission, TYPROS has been placing young professionals on nonprofit boards across the city for over a decade. And despite the tumultuous year we've had, we are proud to once again provide this opportunity in 2021. As we will discuss later in this session, we have restructured this program in a collaborative effort with Leadership Tulsa and Junior League of Tulsa to provide even more opportunities for board skill trainings and improved board matchmaking. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little more about TYPROS Leadership and Service Crew for those who might be interested in getting more involved. Leadership and Service is one of 7 TYPROS crews, which bring together like-motivated young professionals to discuss topics that they are passionate about and to build initiatives around these topics that develop individual skills and improve our city. Leadership and Service Crew exists to connect young talent with opportunities to serve the community and develop both themselves personally and professionally. We also focus on community service and volunteering. If you'd like to get more involved with Leadership and Service or any of our other 6 crews, you can join us on social or go to typros.org to learn more about each crew and check out our calendar for upcoming events. We'd also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who allow us to put on programs like Get On Board at no cost to young professionals in our city. TYPROS premier sponsors are One Oak, Aon, and Consumer Affairs. TYPROS Leadership and Service Crew benefactors are Bill Knight Ford and One Gas. And our Leadership and Service Crew sponsors are the McNally's Group and CF Industries. Finally, before we go over our agenda and begin programming this evening, I'd like to cover just a few housekeeping items. Since we have so many awesome young professionals in this session, we ask that you keep your microphone on mute throughout the evening. If you have a question, please type it in the chat. And during our Q&A, you can raise your hand using the hand raise emoji on your lower bar to indicate that you have a question, at which point someone will call on you and you can unmute to ask your question. We'll also be going into breakout rooms later in the evening to hear from previous Get On Board interns and learn about their experiences. You may unmute yourself to have conversations in those breakout rooms, but please just be mindful of allowing other individuals enough time to ask their questions. This session is being recorded and will be made available on our social and YouTube channels after the event for your review. However, those who are attending the event tonight will be given greater weight in the application process. Without further ado, let's do a quick summary of our agenda. So to begin, we'll hear from Community Service Council for a brief presentation on some interesting data from our Tulsa community. This presentation is critical for understanding many of the challenges and opportunities that nonprofits in Tulsa are facing, and that you can help address as a board intern. Following the presentation from the Community Service Council, we'll have a brief Q&A session with Melanie. And then at 6 p.m., we will do a program overview of Get On Board, so you have more information or more familiar with the expectations and opportunities of the program. We'll then go into breakout rooms for 15 minutes to hear from past interns and have an opportunity to ask them questions about their experiences. Finally, we'll do a brief wrap up and provide the application link and final information about the application process and some tips. TYPROS leaders will stay behind at that time to answer any further questions that you might have at the very end. With that, let's hand it off to Melanie Poulter with the Community Service Council to tell us about the state of our city through data. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Monique. Let's see if I can start with sharing my screen. Okay, I assume you guys now are seeing the actual slideshow version. Please let me know if that's so. And I can no longer see you guys, so.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great.
Looks great.
Okay. So I'm really glad to be with you guys this evening. It's really great to see all of your faces and the rooms that you office in part of the time or whatever. I think that's really kind of a fun thing about doing Zoom meetings. You get to peek at a side of people you don't normally get to see, so it's kind of fun. As Monique mentioned, I'm going to give kind of a quick overview of kind of what's going on in Tulsa in terms of what it looks like now demographically, some demographic trends that we're experiencing, and then go through just some highlights of focusing on 5 areas that kind of reflect the well-being of Tulsans. So we're going to look at a little bit about economic opportunity, education, housing, justice, and health. And keep in mind as we're looking at these different topics that all of these are very interrelated in terms of well-being. So each of these areas impacts other areas. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind while we're looking at these different things. Sometimes it's more obvious than at other times, but let's jump right in, because I could present much more, but we're gonna can I go quickly to try to get in as much as possible. And again, this is not at all comprehensive. These are just kind of some major issues affecting Tulsans right now. So starting with demographic trends, like the state and the nation, Tulsa is experiencing some shifts demographically. And we're going to start by looking just at how the population of the city of Tulsa has changed over time. Our latest count or estimate is at 401,760 in 2019. As you can see from this trend line, we've experienced very slow growth over the last couple of decades, about 2.5% over the past decade. We'll actually come back to this graph with an added line in just a minute to show you another kind of part of the population, another way of looking at it. One of the ways in which Tulsa is changing is the age distribution. And again, that's not unlike the rest of the state and the nation. So from children representing about 35% of the population in 1960 to about 25% today, and folks over 65 representing 8% of the population in 1960 to 15% today. This gradual shift is due to declining birth rates, improvements in healthcare technology, resulting in longer life expectancy. Also, the progression of the baby boom population. And let's see if I can get that to pop up. Okay. So the dark rectangles that should have just appeared behind that graph show the placement in age of the baby boom generation through each of those decades. So notice how the presence of the baby boomers tends to enlarge the age groups that they fall in at that time. So this trend is projected to continue over the next several decades, albeit at a gradually slowing pace after about 2030. These evolving demographic shifts create a ripple effect as they exert profound impact on workforce dynamics, the dependency ratio, health and educational systems, and the economy and human service industries in general. So the other way we're going to look at how the demographics of Tulsa is changing is through is looking at race and ethnicity. When we want to understand current race distribution, we look at the total population, which is on the left. When we want to get an idea of what to expect for the future, we can look at the distribution for young children, which is on the right. What this comparison tells us is that Tulsa is growing increasingly diverse. Tulsa's current population is nearly 50% people of color, while Tulsa's young child population is almost 2/3 people of color. And I apologize if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. Somebody is probably driving up. So this comparison shows that the fastest growing groups in Tulsa are Hispanic, Latino, and persons of 2 or more races, which in Oklahoma, that largely means Native American plus white is the most common combination for 2 or more races. And 1/4 of Tulsa's young children are Hispanic. So just to reiterate the impact of the Hispanic population on Tulsa, let's look at that same graph that I showed a minute ago, but with the additional line representing what Tulsa's population would look like without the Hispanic presence. So that blue dotted line is where Tulsa would be without our Hispanic population. We would be 70,000 fewer people, about 17% of our population. So a very key, important part of our population. Shifting to economic opportunity, this is a very compact and detailed table. And if you have seen these presentations before, you may have seen this before and may remember it a little bit, but basically it's a comparison of what we call a living wage, which has been determined to be what it takes to actually support a household size of 4 different sizes in Tulsa at a very modest level, pretty minimally getting by, compared to poverty wages and then the differences between those levels. So the living wage is a concept developed to more accurately reflect the household income levels necessary to meet basic needs, other than the poverty measures. So it's basically what it takes for a family to be self-sufficient. These levels refer to Tulsa County, and if you'll take a look at that annual income, this is for a 3-person family. This is the poverty level for a 3-person family, so that 21,720. Equivalent to $10.44 an hour of full-time employment. Both the living wage calculator and other research show that the income levels necessary to maintain self-sufficiency indicate that the dollar amount associated with poverty falls substantially short of what is actually required to meet a family's basic needs. For instance, the living wage income level for that same family of 3 in Tulsa County is found to be $60,923, $39,000 higher than what we call poverty for that same family. So to put this into context, when we talk about the number of people or families who officially live below the poverty line, we're talking, for example, about the single parent of 2 children that earns less than $10.44 an hour. We know that these folks are struggling to pay their bills and to feed their kids. But what we often don't realize is that Tulsa is home to a multitude of families that earn more than poverty wages, but still struggle to pay the bills and feed the kids. These are the families earning less than the living wage, that amount needed to be self-sufficient without public or private assistance. So it actually takes between 178 and about 286% of the poverty level to be self-sufficient in Tulsa. So to take this another step, if you're kind of skeptical in the least about those dollar amounts for the living wage, let's kind of break it down here. So we said it was about $60,000 for a family of 3 is what it takes to be self-sufficient in Tulsa. So that comes out to about $5,077 a month. And if we look at the kind of basic necessities of living, this is what that comes out to. For housing, about $865 a month. childcare, $975. And remember, or not remember, I don't think I've said it yet, but there's one preschool age child in this family and one elementary school child. So food, about $557 a month. Transportation, $891. Medical, $584, which is going to include premiums, copays, any kind of medical emergency that happens, medications, and other is $406 a month. So that would include things like clothing, furniture, if the family has a dog food, vet bills, and then taxes, $800 a month. So I don't think any of these amounts seem unreasonable from my experience. In fact, many times when I have shared this information, people think that these amounts are actually low for Tulsa. So one more slide looking at this living wage compared to poverty again. So what we're doing here is comparing living wage, which is the green dotted line, comparing that to other wages, other standard wages. So a living wage income is substantially higher than what this 3-person family can reach through welfare or by full-time employment at either minimum wage or poverty wage. It also exceeds what this family could earn with full-time employment at 185 or 200% of poverty. So when we look in just a minute at the share of the population living below poverty level and below 200% of poverty, remember this graph showing that even at 200% of poverty, many people still don't reach a level of self-sufficiency. So basically this gap right here. I was showing it on my screen, not yours. The last column on this graph shows the median family incomes for all families with children and 3 family types, married, couple, male-headed and female-headed. So notice the average Tulsa family with children earns nearly $10,000 less than living wage. So what that means is well over half of Tulsa's families do not earn a living wage. And I mentioned we'd look at some poverty levels. So based on what now you understand about what the poverty rate means, and we refer to that as 100% of poverty, and various levels of poverty, specifically 200% of poverty, we'll look at poverty rates for the total population and by age. So 19% of Tulsans live below 100% of poverty, and 40% live below 200%. Almost a third of young children live below 100% of poverty, and over half live below 200% of poverty. And one of my dogs now is scratching on the door trying to get in. So I hope it doesn't bother you too much. We'll try to continue and just ignore her. So all of that talk about wages probably makes you wonder who's working. Well, most Tulsans are working. 66% of all Tulsans age 16 plus. 78% of the folks who we classify in the age group that we classify typically consider as the normal working age population, the 20 to 64-year-olds. 73% of Hispanics, 72% of Native Americans, 64% of Blacks, and 63% of whites. So, and keep in mind that these rates represent what residents reported during 2019, so before COVID hit. At this point, we know that many people have lost their jobs, and the unemployment rates have increased. So this preceded the pandemic. But basically, most people are working, and yet a lot of families are having trouble affording basic necessities. So what are they doing in order to get by? Well, this graph shows the distribution of people and families who are relying on public assistance programs. Over a third of infants and 14% of young children receive WIC nutritional assistance. 18% of residents receive SNAP, which is Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, what we used to call food stamps. Over half of the county's public school students participate in the school free and reduced lunch program. In Tulsa Public Schools specifically, that's about 75% of the students. A fifth of all residents and over half of children depend on Sooner Care for health care. Switching to education, let's start with an overview of educational attainment for our adult population. And the key significance of this indicator is that wages tend to be higher and enable a greater likelihood of self-sufficiency as the education level increases. What this shows us is that 12% of Tulsans have less than a high school education, and about a quarter have only a high school diploma. Only about 4 out of 10 have a college degree. At 25.6%, Oklahomans rank 44th among the states in the rate of adult population with a bachelor's degree or higher, meaning that 43 states have more highly educated populations than Oklahoma. Quick look at how Tulsa Public Schools and the other area school districts are doing in third grade, basically reading proficiency. And as you can see, our rates are pretty low. The overall county average for proficient is 27. For advanced is about 10%. So only about 37% of our kids in third grade read at a proficient or advanced level. This is a problem. Through third grade, students are learning to read. After third grade, they are reading to learn. This essentially means that students need to have acquired by third grade all the basic skills necessary for reading and for progressing as developmentally appropriate to read more challenging materials in later grades. Beginning in fourth grade, students must be able to read and comprehend grade level appropriate materials in order to have the opportunity to learn from other subjects. Only 4 Tulsa County school districts have at least 50% of the students score proficient or advanced on third grade reading test. 8th grade math is not very different. About 23% of, on average, the county's 8th graders score proficient or above on the 8th grade math test. And again, you know, this is important for being able to proceed with more challenging levels of math through high school and college. So switching to housing, a lack of affordable housing has led to a housing crisis all across the nation, including in Tulsa. This began before COVID hit, but is now being exacerbated by the pandemic due to job loss. Research finds that in order to maintain a balanced household budget, no more than 30% of a household's income should be expended on housing costs. Fair market rent is the estimate of what a renter seeking a modest rental income home can expect to pay for rent and utilities in the current market. So in Tulsa County, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom is $898. A wage of $35,920 reflects what a full-time worker needs to earn in order to afford such a 2-bedroom unit, which is the equivalent of $17.27 an hour, about $10 more per hour than minimum wage. Renters in Tulsa County would need to work about 95 hours per week, so that's more than 2 full-time jobs at minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. Of the 100 largest cities in the country, Tulsa has the 11th highest eviction rate at 7.8%. That's the equivalent of about 17.2 households evicted every day. Now, this was, again, pre-COVID, and unfortunately, I think those eviction rates have increased this year due to COVID and job loss. An unduplicated total of 5,612 individuals experienced sheltered homelessness in Tulsa in 2018, meaning they were residing in emergency shelters, transitional housing, or safe haven facilities. Many others experience homelessness but are not included in this count as they may stay outdoors or stay intermittently with friends. Most of those were adults age 25 and older, but 748 were kids under the age of 17 and 532 are young people, 17 to 24. 30% of Tulsans experiencing sheltered homelessness report a physical disability, and 7% are veterans. About 29% of homeless youth are LGBTQ, 32% have been in the foster care system, and 39% have been in juvenile detention or jail. Speaking of jail, another area through which we measure well-being of a population is in the area of justice. Nationally, imprisonment rates reached a peak in mid to late 2000s and have been declining significantly since then to a low of 419 per 100,000 in 2019. Oklahoma has the second highest rate of incarceration of all states in the country and the world. Louisiana actually has passed us. Now they have the highest incarceration rate of all the states. More specifically, Oklahoma has the third highest incarceration rate for men and the second highest for women. Now, we had previously held the record for the highest incarceration rate for women for some time. Idaho now has the highest rate of incarceration of women. And I found that really interesting. I don't know if any of you know much about Idaho, but that one kind of surprised me. Looking at some health indicators, Oklahoma ranks 46th out of 50 in overall health, so not great health. Only Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Alabama are ranked less healthy. The main factors placing Oklahoma at such poor levels include high prevalence of smoking, high rates of uninsured, and high infant mortality rate. On the positive side, Oklahoma has a low prevalence of excessive drinking, high rate of mental health providers, and low prevalence of low birth weight babies. Health status is made up of both health determinants and health outcomes. Oklahoma's worst rankings in health determinants include lack of health insurance, occupational fatalities, and childhood immunizations. Since the state just recently passed the Medicaid expansion bill, that actually we should be doing much better in that measure with insurance. Although the share of Oklahomans who smoke is declining, the state continues to rank in the bottom 10. Oklahoma ranked among the unhealthiest 10 for many measures of health outcomes, including cardiovascular deaths, infant mortality, cancer deaths, and premature deaths. This is a map of the Tulsa area and the location of food deserts, which are defined as in green, low-income areas where a significant share of residents live more than a mile in urban areas from the nearest grocery store. And in orange are low-income areas where a significant share of residents live more than a half mile from the nearest grocery store. So as you can see from this map, many Tulsa residents, primarily in Northwest and East Tulsa, live in identified food deserts, which contribute to poorer health due to lower access to fresh produce. And you can't talk about well-being without talking about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences, which we call ACEs, and I'm going to call it that for short, is a conceptual model for better understanding the impact of childhood trauma. The original ACE study, as well as subsequent studies, find correlations between childhood neglect, abuse, and household dysfunction with later life health and well-being. Studies find that children who experience more childhood trauma actually experience changes and disruptions in their neurodevelopment. Persons with higher levels of ACEs are at increased risk of negative academic outcomes, adoption of high-risk behaviors, and ultimately poorer well-being throughout the lifespan, including greater likelihood of premature death. So adverse childhood experiences include recurrent physical abuse, recurrent emotional abuse, sexual abuse, an alcohol or drug abuser in the household, an incarcerated household member who is chronically depressed, suicidal, institutionalized, or mentally ill, mother being treated violently, one or neither parent living with child, and some constructs include poverty as one of those traumatic experiences as well. Any one of these experiences may be traumatic itself by itself to create changes in neurodevelopment, but the increase in the number of adverse childhood experiences increases the correlation with negative lifetime outcomes. According to the ACE study, about 13% of average middle-class Americans experienced 4 or more of these conditions as a child. Higher levels of ACEs tend to make high-risk behaviors more likely, and ultimately greater likelihood of disease, disability, and premature death. The implications for our state are tremendous, with the large numbers of children experiencing child abuse and neglect, incarcerated parents, parents with mental illness and substance abuse problems, and single parenting. In fact, Oklahoma has one of the highest rates of occurrence of adverse childhood experiences. I listed child abuse and neglect as an ACE. A total of 2,849 Tulsa County children were confirmed to have been abused or neglected during 2019. The majority of child abuse victims statewide were neglected, most frequently by threat of harm, followed by exposure to domestic violence, failure to protect, and inadequate or dangerous shelter. Finally, some key findings from Tulsa Mental Health Plan. Over 140,000 Greater Tulsa area residents have a mental illness. Mental illness is a major driver of poor overall health and low life expectancy. Children and youth are at increasing risk of mental illness and lack a strong foundation for lifelong mental health. According to the Mental Health America, Oklahoma ranks 45th in the nation on a composite measure of youth, mental illness, and access to care, and 43rd on the share of youth with severe depression who do not receive some consistent treatment. Tulsa's system of care for mental health and substance use is fragmented, uncoordinated, and dominated by costly and ineffective responses. Tulsa has some pieces of a well-designed continuum of care, but there are many gaps, shortages, and inefficiencies. In many cases, the mental health and substance use treatment system is not delivering the right care at the right time to the right people. As a result, the criminal justice system has become the de facto setting for many residents with mental illness. Inadequate funding and support for mental health services constrains service provision and quality of care. Again, the state's recent passage of Medicaid expansion should help this situation. And many mental health problems track closely to the geography of disadvantage. Health and well-being are rooted in broader social, behavioral, and environmental conditions. Poverty, trauma, unemployment, food insecurity, and housing instability shape people's lives, the conditions in which mental illness and other health problems develop, and the ability to seek and get help. Native American and African American residents experience higher rates of mental illness than the Tulsa population as a whole, reflecting long-standing inequalities in the social determinants of health and mental health, and they are disproportionately represented in the publicly funded mental health service system. Tulsa is not growing in numbers, but it is transforming into a much more diverse and an older population. And it's crucial for leaders to be appreciative of the many implications of these shifts. Although the vast majority of our working age population and quite a few of our past working age population are in the labor force, earning adequate income to meet basic needs is a challenge. Many of Tulsa's children face adversities that limit their opportunities to lead long, healthy, successful, and productive lives. Many Tulsa families struggle to maintain housing on an ongoing basis, not unrelated to the fact that Oklahoma's kids experience greater levels of traumatic events than kids in the rest of the country. Oklahoma ranks very poorly compared to other states in overall health.
Thank you, Melanie. That was a lot of really great information. Really informative.
Great.
I
I
know we
just
have.
now saw the clock and realized I have gone over a little bit. I
That's
hope there's
okay.
some time for questions.
That's okay. We have a couple of questions. The first one I see is that we also have incredibly high incarceration rates. Are those people counted in the statistics and the population and unemployment statistics, those that are incarcerated? Do you know?
That is a great question. So in terms of counting in our population, yes. They are counted, though, where they are. So for instance, in the recent 2020 census, they are part of the group quarters count. But people who are living right now located in the Tulsa County Jail, they would be part of the group quarters population. If they're incarcerated long term, then yes, they're part of that group quarters population for that community. In terms of labor force, they would not be counted in labor force because that is only includes people who are actively seeking employment, whether they're actually employed or unemployed. Okay. So I don't think it would include them, unless it is a work release kind of situation or if they're classified as employed. Okay. Good question, though.
Okay. Robert is asking, is this slide deck available to the public?
It is, and it will be posted on Community Service Council's website. And I'm also glad to share it with you, Monique, if people would like to have a copy of the presentation.
Yeah, I bet that would be great. Okay, I've got another question, this one from Jason. To what do you attribute the diminished growth rate in Tulsa? No inflow of new residents or mass exodus of current residents? Do you know?
There are different factors are happening. So nationally, a few decades back, there was kind of an exodus out of inner cities or primary cities and into the suburbs. So if I was to have shown you also Tulsa County's growth, Tulsa County has grown more rapidly than Tulsa during this time. So part of that is families moving to the suburbs. So in spite of, our increase in Hispanic population, for instance, and other immigrants from other countries, that's still not made up the difference for the loss in those kinds of areas. Also, our overall birth rate has declined. So families are not as big as they used to be. So, those things, along with just things like economic development, job opportunity, how many folks from other places are moving to Tulsa, that kind of issue.
Okay. Okay. And our final question for you, Melanie, is are these numbers that you just presented for Tulsa proper? And if so, how do they compare in general to the Tulsa metro area?
So most of the stats I did just give are for the city of Tulsa. Some of them just because of the way data are available represented Tulsa County. For instance, the graph showing the public participation in the different assistance programs, that's for Tulsa County. The Tulsa metro area is likely to reach 1,000 with the 2020 census. So the city of Tulsa is probably about half of the entire Tulsa metro area. Of course, there's a lot of interaction among all the suburban communities in Tulsa in terms of workforce, people coming to Tulsa for school or employment, shopping, entertainment, that kind of thing. But there's more diversity within the city of Tulsa. Some other things, I'm trying to think of particular indicators. that are going to be a little different for it. You know, it kind of depends too on the individual communities when you're comparing things like educational rates, and you did see the graph showing the third grade reading and eighth grade map and the differences between Tulsa and the suburbs. So it just kind of depends on the particular indicator.
Okay. Okay, well, unfortunately, I know probably people have some more questions, but we've got to move on. Is it okay to reach out to you or your department if we have questions about local data?
Absolutely. That's part of what we do at Community Service Council. That's one of the services we provide. We are a census information center, so I help people all the time find data they're looking for. And I'm glad to do that. Again, I'll share the presentation with you, and it has my email address on the last page of our website. So
perfect. Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you to the Community Service Council as well.
Thanks for having me. Y'all have a great night.
Of course. You too. Okay. Well, that was very informative. Hopefully that presentation gave you a little insight into the type of organization or mission that you would want to get involved with to help create change in our community. So before we head into our breakout rooms, let me tell you a little bit about the Get On Board program details and about our collaborative effort. So this is a brand new collaborative effort that we have here between TYPROS, Leadership Tulsa, and Junior League. TYPROS offers the only board intern placement program focused specifically on young professionals under the age of 40, and that's completely free of charge. This collaboration that we have provides more consistency in training that interns receive. And we've created a new shared training calendar in partnership with the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits. So those training dates are forthcoming. So how does this all work? Beginning tonight, we will give everyone access to the application link. Applications are due at midnight on November 29th, which is a Sunday. A TYPROS committee will blindly review these applications and select the top 30 applicants. All selected interns will attend a board basics workshop and at least 2 other special topic trainings, such as finances, fundraising, program evaluation, board diversity, etc., before being placed on the board. So you will have a total of 6 months between January to June 2021 to complete these 3 trainings. And interns will also have access to optional monthly board skill-up sessions on Monday evenings all year round. Those who have completed all 3 required trainings by June 2021 will be matched with their board in July of 2021. And will serve as a board intern for a complete year. So that's from July 2021 to June 2022. Board interns will be expected to attend all board meetings with their nonprofit and are highly encouraged to join board committees and actively participate on their board. Board interns are non-voting members of the board, but there's no legal or fiduciary obligations or responsibilities as an intern. Many applicants often have questions about scheduling. So if you're selected as an intern, we'll help match you with a nonprofit board that best meets your scheduling needs. So some boards meet over the lunch hour, some in the evening, some meet monthly, some quarterly, and so on. Each nonprofit is different, so we'll do our best to match you with one that will work with your schedule. In addition to attending board meetings, interns will be required to complete 2 additional trainings between July 2021 and June 2022, so the year of their actual internship. However, they get to pick the topics and the dates that work best for them over that course of the year. TYPROS Get On Board interns will also be expected to attend 4 cohort sessions, which will be like a September, December, March, and June, which are touch point meetings that allow us to get together to give updates about how our internships are going, troubleshoot any issues that we're having, and find potential ways to collaborate with other organizations. All training sessions and cohort meetings will be held on Monday evenings. Nonprofits view this program as an excellent way for sourcing fresh, talented board members, and approximately 40% of board interns stay on as full-time board members after they've completed the program. And some interns have a great experience with their match nonprofit, but decide to join a different board after their internship is complete. TYPROS holds this program in high esteem and requires that all selected participants maintain the utmost professionalism and follow through on their board commitments. If you're unsure that you can complete the program for this year for any reason, we ask that you consider applying again another year. We know this is a lot of information, but we'll make sure that those who are selected for the program know all of their requirements and have dates on their calendars well in advance to anticipate any conflicts. Anyone who has questions about these expectations can ask their questions at the very end of this session tonight, or you can email us directly. And now we head off to our breakout rooms. We'll return back here to discuss next steps after that. So I just want to say welcome back. I hope that breakout sessions provided a little more insight into the awesome opportunities that this program really offers. We're excited about the new training opportunities we have thanks to the collaborative partnership. Our Get On Board program is really one of my favorite things that we do here at TYPROS. I'm the executive director at a nonprofit called Pathways Adult Learning Center, and we have had several interns over the years that have gone on to become excellent board members. One will even serve as our board president this year. So serving on a board is a wonderfully impactful way to make a difference in our community, and it's a great skill builder and great on your resume. So I'm so glad you guys are considering this opportunity. At this time, I'm gonna wrap up with next steps. So to apply for this program, you're going to use the link in the chat to complete the application by midnight on Sunday, November 29th, which is roughly 2 weeks from now. Let me make sure the link is in the chat. There we go. So roughly 2 weeks from now, we'll also email this link out to those who registered for tonight. In the past, people have asked for feedback on strengthening their application. If you want that help, you can actually send your application draft to me directly at mscraper@pathwaysok.org. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. There we go. If you email your application draft to me by November 26th, we will do our best to provide you with some high-level feedback to help you strengthen that application. And applicants can make edits to their application until November 29th. So as you have probably noticed with so many people in this session, this process is pretty competitive. So I just wanted to give you just a few pro tips to help put together a really strong application. That means you're going to need to stand out a little from the crowd, and you can do that by sharing some concrete details and examples of your interests, your accomplishments, your community involvement, or what you've done at work that makes you an excellent candidate for board internship. Specifics are good. Let your passion shine through the application and really sell yourself a little. The committee will review and decide the 30 applicants who will be moving forward, and everyone will be notified by December 31st this year about whether or not they've been accepted into the program. If you are accepted, we will follow up with dates for training sessions for you to put on your calendar for 2021 and 2022. Board placements will not happen until June of 2021. And all accepted interns will also be invited to the TYPROS Slack workspace channel to get updates and to be able to discuss the Get On Board program with other interns. With that, we are now adjourned, but if anybody wants to ask a question, we will stay on now to do a quick Q&A, so feel free to stay for that or to head out. And if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and or type it into the chat.
Hi, I had a question. Can we walk through the requirements for the application process? Like as far as, it's like I can see on the SurveyMonkey just the first page, which is just initial, about you. But going forward, like, do we need to have recommendation letters or anything like that?
No recommendation letters required. We know that this 2-week turnaround for the due date for the application is pretty quick. So it's a fairly simple form. It's going to be asking about your TYPROS involvement. If you have that, it's going to be asking about your current community involvement, what skills and expertise you're bringing to the table, why you're interested in becoming a board intern, and questions of that nature.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. It should probably take about 10 to 15 minutes to complete, I would think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. That's easy.
Pretty short.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Is the list of nonprofits that are available for the program available anywhere, or is it part of the application itself?
That is a great question. So I don't know if the list is publicly available, but on the application itself, I believe there's a question where it asks you like the types of nonprofit organizations, so education, human services, etc., and you would mark all of the ones that you are interested in. And so that's how we would sort of find a good match for you, is based on what your interests are and what your availability is, and then what each nonprofit is looking for in an intern, what skills and expertise they're looking for, and find the best possible match if you're selected.
Perfect. And I hope it's okay to continue this on just a little bit. There was another question in our breakout session that we didn't get answered that I thought was really wonderful of, do the boards have any, so like we were told that we can like pref one if we get selected. Do the boards have any input on their end of like who they want to be matched with once the 30 people are selected?
So we don't necessarily like match them or provide them the information of the 30 candidates, but when they applied to be a part of this program, they indicated specifically like, I'm looking for a finance person, or I'm looking for somebody with like a programmatic background or something like that, or specific demographics.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me kind of monopolize the questions here for a second.
Of course. And I see a question in the chat. Are there any pre-application guidelines in regards to potential conflicts of interest or any expected challenges to preferred interests or placement? That's an interesting question. No, I don't think so. If you have something like that in mind that you think might be a conflict of interest, you can put something like that somewhere in your application, and that would be good information. Or just wait, and if you're selected, then you would talk to us at that time, and we would make sure to match you with an organization that wouldn't be a problem.
Do we need to have an idea of the kind of nonprofit we'd like to work with, or is it okay if we would be open to working with several?
So the application really asks you for like, it lists some like types of nonprofits that are more broad. Because we have our 30 TYPROS members here, but we also have a number of people from the Leadership Tulsa and Junior League that are also part of this program trying to be matched. And so we don't necessarily match you with like a requested nonprofit for your internship year, but we try to match you with your interest area and obviously your availability. Any other questions?
Hi, are there any components to the process after you submit the application, like interviews or anything like that?
No, it's pretty simple. You submit the application, and then the committee on the back end is going to just fully base their decision off of that application. And again, the committee is making these decisions blind. So like identifying information, your names are removed to try to make the process as fair as possible.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Last call for questions. Do we have to provide documentation of projects or volunteer hours? Nope, no documentation required. So you'll just describe it in the application. Great question. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, again, my email's in the chat. We're going to email out the link to the application following this meeting, maybe tomorrow. And we'll go from there. You can reach out to us with your questions. And again, if you want somebody to look at your application draft and give you some feedback, we will do our best to do that as long as you send it by November 26th. So there's enough time. All right, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Thank you for your time, and we're really excited to get this year started. All right, bye everybody. Have a great night.
Bye. Thank you
so much.